Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Rossinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith in the New York City metropolitan area. Please be sure to download the app, share it with your friends. And if you like what Joe and I do, we're all over social media, X, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube. We go live Thursday nights, 9 o'clock. We post all of our Veritas interviews on social media. So if you like what we do, if you like the conversations, you think they're important, and you want other people to hear them, please hit a like, a subscribe, a share, do all that fun stuff. Help us out too. So today, I mean, this is kind of like Joe and mine are our bread and butter, okay? Because when we started this show, even before we were on Veritas, we said we want to just do our part, whatever our part is, in trying to turn this culture around, okay? And turn it around to what end, okay? We have to get back to God. We have to get back to a moral foundation. And nobody in America, I don't care, conservative, liberal, anywhere in between, we're not a moral nation. We do some good things, but we're going to talk about it with Ed Van Buskirk, who's a friend of the show, and we're welcoming back. Okay, we need the 10 Commandments because obviously we've gone off the rails. One needs only think about abortion laws in America, regardless of Roe versus Wade being overturned. Okay, we are still a pro-abortion country. That's the way it is. And that's just one example of how we've gone off the rails in America. And this is the topic of the conversation today with Ed, is America needs to embrace the 10 Commandments once again. Now, we have prior interviews with Ed Van Buskirk where we talk about similar things, okay? Today, we're going to be discussing a few topics where, let's say, embracing the 10 Commandments certainly pertains. And for those of you who don't remember Ed, Ed Van Buskirk is founder and president of If You Love Me, If You with a capital U, Love Me, a Catholic apostolate dedicated to restoring God's truth and timeless wisdom. Ed sold his successful IT company in 2017 and dedicated his new career to his ministry. He's the author and producer of God's Recipe for a Wonderful Life. It's a book and video study of the commandments, which have been given an imprimatur. I have to always remember to pronounce that word properly, Ed. Imprimatur by Bishop of Kansas City, James V. Johnson. And he also created God's Recipe for School and Family, a program for children and their families to learn and live the commandments. Ed speaks across the country at parishes, conferences, retreats, business events. He comes on the front line with Joe and Joe every now and again. He's a regular contributor to the Catholic Exchange, and I would encourage you, and I'll post a link in the description, to go to Catholic Exchange. It's a great resource for Catholics, not just so you can see Ed's articles, but many, many others of interest that we should, or things that we should be interested in. And his articles have also been featured in the National Catholic Register's Best in Catholic Blogging multiple times. Ed Van Buskirk, our friend, welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe.
It's great to be here. And one of the things I really like about the front line and the work that you all do is you take the commandments and you make them relevant in our world today. A lot of people look at the commandments as being, just a list of nice things to maybe keep in mind, but you really make them relevant to when they really are. They're so relevant every day in the small and in the not so small decisions that we make and the way we treat one another every day. So I really appreciate what you all do, really giving people a clear view as to how relevant these commandments are.
No, absolutely, Ed, and we're going to get into that. I'm glad you brought that up, but I want to hand it over to Joe first. And yeah, I have a place I want to kick it off, but I want to throw it over to Joe first.
Ed, we always begin with the prayer in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Remember, our most gracious Virgin Mary, never was it known that anyone who sought your help or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, a virgin's our mother. To you we come, for you we stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother, the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your clemency hear and answer us. Amen. Name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Joe, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I would like to, if that's okay. And Ed and Joe, you both are going to see where I'm going with this. I have to hear, and we've had to hear from the aggressive atheists over the last 20 years, and this is where I'm going to tie in the 10 Commandments. God is so oppressive. He gives us all these darn rules, and they point out the commandments. And here's my point. Okay, they're atheists, so I get they really don't care about the first three commandments, all right, which pertain to our relationship with God. But as far as how human beings are to treat one another, and then I'm going to throw it right to you, Ed. God's being oppressive because he says don't kill one another, don't lie to one another, don't steal from one another. If you're married, be faithful to your wife. Don't be jealous of what your neighbor has. This is an oppressive God who's an authoritarian. In other words, that I'm supposed to say, I need to be free of these things. Where does it get you? If you don't adhere to those things, and again, I don't mean to leave God aside of the first three commandments, but as far as like you mentioned when you just talked about what Joe and I are trying to do, no, we do need the 10 commandments because guess what? Human beings do kill one another, whether it's war or abortion. Okay, divorce, adultery is encouraged. Pornography is the biggest industry on the internet, has been since its inception. Contraception is not only accepted outside of the Catholic Church or amongst Catholics, it's accepted by Catholics. All right. We allow politicians to lie through their teeth all the time, and the media. Nobody says anything about it. So here's my larger question. I know that was a little bit of a rant, Ed Van Buskirk. Don't we need the 10 Commandments?
Well, if you think of just us getting along as human beings, if you set God aside, which it's hard to do in any conversation, it seems like, because he's so relevant all the time. But if you think of us just getting along with one another, just living in a sense of harmony, if we don't have a common set of laws for us to follow, and everybody's making up their own set of rules, what do you have? You got chaos. You have disharmony. And that's what moral relativism really is. We've taken the moral laws that God has given us, this common set of laws from our Creator, and pushed them to the side to say, oh, we can make up our own rules, moral relativism. And people say, well, that's a better way to live. Well, it's not showing to be. It's not panning out that way. And it really creates division. And it's also a sign of weakness to say, I'm not going to live by other people's laws, whether they're from God or not. I'm just going to live by my laws. That's just showing a sign of selfishness, a sign of weakness, and what that leads to is chaos and disharmony and loneliness. And we have literally we have an epidemic of loneliness as declared by the U.S. Surgeon General 2 years ago. And that's what moral relativism leads us to. So for the atheist who is thinking, I don't need a set of laws from God, it's like, well, where are we going to get them? And whose authority? If we don't have a creator who has the authority to give us these laws, who's going to be the authority that we're all going to agree with and say, oh, okay, I'll follow that set of laws, and knowing that everyone else sets them. God is our creator, has the authority to make the laws. We look at we look at the roads. The roads were created by the state, by the city. Doesn't the state and the city have the authority to create the laws? And don't we all look at them and go, oh, okay, it makes sense to go a speed limit and to stop at red lights and to use our turn signal and so forth. Nobody begrudges those laws from the creator of the roads. And those laws were created so we can live in harmony with one another and get along, and we can go out and we can enjoy the roads for the purpose for which they were created, instead of saying, I'm not going out there. That would be a slave to other people's anarchy and the chaos on the roads if there were no laws or if they weren't followed. But nobody begrudges the creator of the roads for making those laws. So why do we begrudge the creator of us, the creator of the universe, to make some laws so that we can enjoy the benefits of living together with one another and live in harmony with one another?
No, absolutely. Ed Van Buskirk is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. I'm going to throw it over to Joe, but I will say this real quick. I remember the only response, because one of my arguments, and again, long before we did Joe and Joe, I mean, obviously, Joe and I, we've thought about these questions. You've obviously thought about these questions. My question, I've argued with atheists in the past, but personally, face to face. And my argument was, if I'm an atheist, why should I do anything outside of my own self-interest? Why should I even acknowledge that there's such a thing as the good? Who cares? If I'm if and even if I'm breaking the law, man's law. If I could get away with it, there's nothing that binds me, okay, other than fear of going to jail to, let's say, follow a law. So why should I be good? Christopher Hitchens' only response to that was, when he was alive, was, "How dare you say that?" Okay, that's great. There's your indignation. But now answer the question. Why should I be good? And what is good if there is no God? Because consensus doesn't do it. You know, the consensus in the world at one point was that black people could be slaves. Okay, so consensus or popular opinion or popular preference doesn't do it. But that's my rant, Ed. I'm going to throw it over to Joe because the veins starting to pop out of my head. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing because we do need the 10 Commandments. And what you're doing, what Joe's doing, what I'm trying to do, we're out there saying, no, 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 no. We need moral boundaries. Okay. If you want, Ed, I'll give you time for a quick comment, then we'll throw it over to Joe.
We definitely need moral boundaries, and once again, if everybody decides on their own, or we if we cast aside the commandments that are given to us by God, who's going to be the authority? And if each person, if an atheist says, "Well, I don't need to worry about anybody else's laws, I just got to live with mine," it's like, well, how's that working for you? How is that coming? Are you getting along with people at work? Are you getting along with your family? Is that really panning out to 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 give you peace? Are you at peace? Are you in any kind of joy? And what is it what's going to happen when that all runs out? When the self-serving attitude gets to where you go, is this all there is? And you got to think beyond that. You got to think beyond ourselves. We're not limited by our physical character, or physical nature, but we can expand beyond that into the joy of others in the relationship. And without having a common set of laws that we can get along with other, we don't have relationships, and it just leads to isolation and loneliness.
I agree with you. And I think you used the right word, Ed, and we'll get into it more at the front line with Joe and Joe. If you're just joining us, Ed Van Buskirk, chaos. Chaos does not lead to harmony, no matter what anybody says. We need the commandments. Joe Rossinello.
I guess I just want to, before we get into some of the issues that face America, which go against the Ten Commandments, I just want to like level set the conversation. We have 50 states. Every single state in the preamble of their state, the first sentence either references God's directly, as in uses the word God, or basically infers. Like, for instance, Colorado says a supreme being. That's the reference. But every single one, 50 states. Why do I say that? America is a Judeo Christian nation. This is not an argument. Like the EU, the European Union, is a secular democracy when it was established. It is not a Judeo Christian organization. America is. So, with that said, there is nothing wrong with guiding our laws based upon the Ten Commandments. That's why I said what I just said. It shouldn't be something that we should be ashamed of or shy about. And frankly, when there is pushback about that, the response should simply be, this is a Judeo Christian nation. This is what you signed up for if you came here. If I go to Saudi Arabia, that is an Islamic nation, and that is what I signed up for. And they have no problem making that known, and neither should we. So that's point one. Point two, if we are a Judeo Christian nation, and we are, then we should basically follow the tenets of our faith. Now, obviously, we have all types of people, sinners, saints, and alike. Same thing within the Catholic Church. Okay, let's level set it once again. There are things that in America that have been basically completely mainstreamed, that absolutely positively go against what we profess as Catholics. And I'm going to start off with one of them, usury. Usury is a sin. In fact, it's a grave sin. Yet, our businesses will start off with banks. Absolutely, positively embrace usury. We vote for it. Our politicians push it. How could you possibly allow someone to take out debt on a credit card and charge them 28% interest? I can get a better rate on the corner than that. Yet, we permit this. A mortgage. How did we allow banks to level set mortgages for our people when if they stretch out their mortgage for 30 years, and most people have to because they have no other choice, you bought 3 houses. How is that legal? And I'm going to tell you this right now for all those who are listening to my voice. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's okay with God. People have this idea that somehow God's cool with that. Well, no, no. I'm not saying you can't make a profit, but what I am saying is that is an example of usury. And that is completely accepted within this country in comfortable business circles. I'm interested in your comments, Ed.
Yeah, yeah. The opposite of love is use. It's to use someone. It's for selfish means. The opposite of love is to be selfish. And when we're selfish with one another, we use another person for our own benefit. And is it a coincidence that use and usury sound very similar? Usury is using another person's for our own uh, self gain. And it's clear in Scripture how we are clearly not to practice usury. And we think of the seventh commandment: "You shall not steal." Usury is a form of stealing, and when we steal from one another, we damage the relationships that we have. If I have either just an acquaintance or a close friend and I steal something from them, small or big, now there's a division, there's separation between us and that person, whether that person finds out about it or not, because now I got to protect the fact that I stole from that person. And I may avoid that person completely. And it creates isolation. It starts to isolate me. And that's what Satan wants. Satan wants us to be isolated so he can just beat the snot out of us. And we need to look at that commandment and say, I shall not steal, or I will not steal, make a decision. But what should we do instead? We should cultivate generosity. When we're generous with one another in personal means or in business, and we're generous with another, what does that do in the relationship? It unites us. It brings us together. That's what Christ was all about, is bringing us together in communion with one another. And so usury, it's not just an onerous law imposed on us. It's so that we can benefit from it and enjoy the gift of one another. And, in business dealings, when someone's loaning other people's money, to do it in a way that is going to unite people together in a generous attitude, instead of one of, well, how much can I get from this person? You think of, the credit cards and the banks. When you get an overdraft, the banks do this friendly little favor for us to say, okay, if you overdraft your account, we're not going to shut you off. We're going to let you have that McDonald's hamburger or whatever it is, big screen TV, whatever it is that you got an impulse or need to buy. And we're going to be so friendly to do that. But guess what? You're going to get your bank statements, and you're going to have all kinds of extra charges, not just the interest, but you're going to have the extra charges of a late fee and a penalty and an overdraft charge. And all of that adds up to where it becomes a trap. And so we've got, the credit card companies that are doing this, but then you've got the payday loan folks. Don't get me started on how insidious the payday loans are. They're coming about as though they're going to be a blessing for someone and get them over the hump, but they put them in a trap because of usury, and it just becomes gets out of control. It's a spiral for folks who get caught in that payday loan trap.
Ed Van Buskirk, let me ask you this. We're going to stay right there. But now, okay, we understand the usurer, okay, wants to basically enslave you financially, okay? Now, Joe mentioned the guy on the corner, okay? Joe and I both grew up in Newark, New Jersey, so we understand what we used to call the Shylock, okay? We didn't call them loan sharks. Hollywood calls them loan sharks. In Newark, New Jersey, you're Italian Catholic, okay, but you're you're a Shylock, okay? That's because that's what, Joe the Shylock, Mike the Shylock. You borrow $1,000 because you lost $1,000 on the Jets game, okay? And I can hearken back to my past because I know that's happened to me in another life, all right? And you don't have the money to pay, and you go and borrow $1,000. And the way they charge you is they charge you $30 a week until you pay back the $1,000, okay? You still owe them $1,000. You just keep giving them $30 a week, all right? At 3 points. And at the end of the year, you've paid $1,500, $1,600 in interest, and you still owe them the $1,000. The banks operate the same way. They've legitimized, and the government's legitimized usury in this country. Banks operate the same. When you're getting charged 28% interest and you're making that minimum payment, you find at the end of the year you've paid thousands of dollars in interest, and you still owe them the principal, or darn near close to it. I wanted to mention that, but here, let me throw this out there to you. We know what the usurer is all about. Talk about our need, again, getting back to the commandments, okay, and listening to God, listening to the church, dare I say, all right? We can't allow ourselves to fall into those traps because we're getting sold a bill of goods by corporate America that says, well, you can have all these luxuries. You could buy $50,000 worth of goods and products and services, all right? And act like the guy who's got a lot of money. And don't worry about it. The minimum payment isn't even a lot, right? And you'll be paying that minimum payment until the day you die to pay back that $50,000 because you're never going to be able to pay it back because you're getting charged these exorbitant interest rates. Talk about our need for some temperance.
Temperance is most important, to be able to exercise the virtues of justice so that we give to others what they're owed, so that the person who's giving a loan gives it to them in a just way. And the person who's taking the loan, pays back in a just way. But it all comes down to, why are we buying all these things to be? Am I back here? I look like I came
Yep.
off there for just a moment. Okay. Do we have a strange God uh, of of prestige, of looking good to the others? Do we have a strange God of putting myself in a place where people look at me and think that I have all the riches of the world? Do I have a strange God of extending myself in business loans beyond what I should, so that I can achieve the strange God, or gain the strange God of money? And when we realize that we're not God, and we are given what we are given to be a blessing to us, but to a blessing of others, and to really, in humility, realize that anything that we do have, it's because of the goodness of God. And for us to not be discontent. We talk about intemperance, or the virtue of being temperate. Um, it- do we do we are we content with the blessings that we have? And that really brings me to the last commandment, or the last two on coveting. So coveting, a lot of people discredit or discard the commandments on coveting because you're not really doing anything. But somebody doesn't go out and extend themselves with bad credit just because they woke up one day and decided they wanted to do that. But it's because they covet something. Often it could be for health reasons. There are some other reasons, but uh, a lot of times, and in our culture today, we covet the material things, the things that really don't satisfy us. And so, in that covetousness, we're not discontent. And we think, oh man, I went over to Bob's house the other day. You know how big his TV was? His TV was 55 inches or 86 inches or whatever it is, and mine was just a mere 42 inches. Man, I need to have that big screen TV. Yeah, it's going to put me in debt, and yeah, it's only $1,000, but because of a credit card, now I'm paying 2 or 3,000 for it over time. It's that discontent where we look at what we've been blessed with, and we downgrade it. We belittle the blessings that God gives us in our covetousness, and that causes us to say, "Well, I need to change this," and we go out and extend ourselves beyond our means.
Yeah, and Ed, I will say this, and I'm gonna hand it over to Joe. It is a struggle. All right, I don't want to ever make it seem to our audience, we say all the time at the front line with Joe and Joe, we're not walking on water over here. We all have our sins. We all have our moments of that jealousness, that covetousness. And I know personally, I have to keep reminding myself all the time, by the way, all right? God has given me so much. And my TV is not as big as the next guy's, and my car is not as nice as the next guy's. And I have to remember that God has given me so much. I have a TV. I have a car. Okay. I have clothes on my back and food in my refrigerator. Okay. I enjoy a scotch on the weekends. All right. God has given me so much. And I think we all in America need to remember that we have blessings. If you have food, shelter, and clothing, okay, you have the necessities of life and you can move forward. But we can't keep our eye all the time on what the other guy has. It's destructive. All right. And I think that's what you were talking about. But I'm being a loudmouth. Let me send it over to Joe.
I want to get to the root of what you both are just saying because I think you could tell yourself only so much. It comes down to, are you grounded in a life of grace? And what I mean by that is this: do you know who you are? You see, we don't know who we are as a nation anymore. That's why people go into debt. They don't know who they are, and they base their value on something that they are not. And society understands that. You see, a marketer understands you better than you understand yourself. People don't get that. But when someone's in business, I look at people and sometimes I understand you better than you understand yourself. And because I'm not grounded in God, I'm going to take advantage of you. And that's what happens. And that's exactly what you're talking about. That's why I'll extend you credit that I know you can't afford because I don't care about you. And if we lived in a Christian society, we would fear doing that, even if we didn't care for the other person, because there are consequences to that. God sees our actions. You see, that's why John Adams said a democracy does not work for people who are not moral or religious. It doesn't work. And that's why America is dysfunctional. Because if I truly believed in God and I feared the fires of hell, and I looked at Ed and I saw that he really likes my TV, and gosh, I could sell him that TV and charge him a ton of interest, and Ed's going to pay it because I see in his eyes that he likes that TV. I won't do that.
Joe, let's take a quick break at the front line with Joe and Joe, and then we'll come back and we'll continue the conversation with Ed Van Buskirk. Ed, real quick, where can our audience members find out more about what you have going on?
Yeah, our website is godsrecipe.org. GODSRECIPE.org. And we've got a lot of resources out there to help remember the commandments, keep them top of mind, and to live them in our daily lives.
No, absolutely. We must get this message out. Joe and I, like I said, Ed, we've been hammering on this with a variety of different guests, but it's good that we focus specifically on the Ten Commandments and the teachings of the Catholic Church. I know that doesn't go over well with a lot of people, but we have to listen to the church. The church is spot on when it comes to these things. So Ed Van Buskirk is with us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. We are way in the breach with Ed Van Buskirk, a very important conversation that we're having here today. The need for the Ten Commandments. America needs to get back to the Ten Commandments, not just the second set of 7, all 10. Starts with God, and then it extends to our fellow human beings. Joe Resinello.
I want to take it in a different direction. We talked about usury, which is theft, which is a violation of the Ten Commandments. I want to talk about marriage, the sin of adultery, but I'm going to take it in a different direction. If one is to divorce their wife and remarry, you have committed adultery. Why do I bring that up? Because it's completely mainstreamed. There have been many things that have taken place in this country. If I was to look at the last 100 years and I could basically lay out on a piece of paper nails in the coffin of America. One of them is what I just talked about, no fault divorce. It used to be illegal, meaning that if you were going to ask for a divorce and you basically went in front of a judge and you said, I don't like the color of my husband's suit, and I want to divorce him, the judge would say, wrong, go back home. that actually, believe it or not, people are listening to my voice. That was the reality of America. That changed. No fault divorce. So basically, I could go to a judge right now and basically say, I don't like the way my wife cooks. I'm divorcing her. And the judge would say, that's good. Separate. That has hurt society. It has wounded children, and it has basically frayed the foundation of America. Completely mainstreamed. Completely mainstreamed. And again, if we claim to be a Judeo Christian nation, how do we think the Lord is going to look at that when we stand in front of him? If you notice in scripture, when Jesus met the woman at the well, he said to her very clearly, no, you don't have one husband, you have five. He was telling her something. Well, many quote unquote Christians in our society today are living that reality. And somehow they think that God does not see it, or he sees the world through our own eyes. And that clearly is not the case because it's completely mainstreamed in America. I'm interested in your thoughts, Ed.
Yeah, God gave us the wonderful, most wise gift of the Ten Commandments out of pure love for us. And when we set aside his love, when we set aside his wisdom and his truth and his commandments to pursue what we think will make us happy, we're saying, I don't want your love. We're saying, I'm going to love myself better than you can love me. That's impossible. God gave us these list of 10 commandments, and the commandment on adultery, because he loves us as individuals, he loves marriage, a husband and a wife, and he loves the families of these marriages. And the culture, when we bring it into the front lines and the reality of today, the culture thrives when the family thrives, and the culture dies when the family dies. And in our lifetimes, we have seen the culture shift from one that is family oriented to one that is me oriented. And you see all these, I don't know what it's like in New Jersey, but here in Kansas City, you see all these condos that are being built. They're 1 and 2 bedroom condos instead of the houses with 3 and 4 bedrooms when we were growing up that would support a family. All these places are being built for single people or a couple with their dogs. They're not looking at family. There's not a commitment there. And so when adultery becomes someone gets attempted with adultery, there's not that commitment. And even those couples who think that they're committed to one another, living with their 2 dogs, there's not that commitment in marriage. There's not that a commitment is we have a responsibility to love our children, to take care of our children. And the adultery in America is so prevalent in so many ways. When the commandment, you shall not commit adultery, was given to us on Mount Sinai, we didn't have uh, magazines with slick pictures in them. We didn't have the video games. We didn't have the movies and the phones in our pockets. And so living a pure life has become so much more difficult because of how prevalent all of this has become in our world. So we need to be ever on our guard. Married or unmarried, we need to ever be on our guard to protect our eyes and our hearts from the sin of adultery, because it leads to that covetousness that we were talking in the first segment, of coveting something in an unjust and in a disordered way, to be self-serving instead of the real purpose of being life-giving.
No, it's so true. Ed Van Buskirk is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. We're discussing, and we're way in the breach. We're discussing the need for the 10 Commandments. It's like people try to suggest. I've seen podcasts with different people. I watch everything, Ed. I don't, and the one good thing I could say about myself is I don't care. I'll listen to an atheist. I'll listen to a secularist. I'll listen to a moral relativist. How else are you going to know what we're refuting if you don't listen to what they have to say? I think it was the atheist Matt Dillahunty, and he said, "Well, if two consenting adults going into a marriage agree that that marriage at some point in the future may end, and they agree to that, and then it ends somewhere in the future, that's just fine. We both agree to it. Don't tell me it doesn't hurt one party. Maybe you're cold and you're cold-hearted, but what if you wake up one day and you want a divorce and the woman that you're married to says, but I don't? Don't tell me it doesn't. Yeah, she might have consented to it. It might have sounded good at the time. Same with adultery. Like people who are in open marriages, who have an open marriage. Don't tell me if your husband is going out and because you have an open marriage and he's doing something that he should not be doing or committing adultery, let's say, that doesn't hurt you in your heart. See, people hide things. And this is where I'm going, Ed, and I love your comments. We lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves to make ourselves feel good. We live in a feel-good culture. If it feels good, the only problem is when you come up against that wall and you're going to feel, in the cases that I gave you, you're going to feel real hurt. It hurts. Don't say that it doesn't. Just say, it might have sounded good at the time, but now that you're in the middle of it, let's say an open marriage and some of the other nonsense that Hollywood pushes, okay? No, you're hurt and you know it. Why? Because the natural law is written in your heart. Those 10 commandments we're talking about, yeah, God wrote them on tablets and gave them to Moses, but he wrote it in your heart too, and you know it. And we hide from that. Talk about that self-deception, Ed, and the need for people to break out of that, okay, to stop deceiving yourself. These things are destructive, and they're destructive to you.
Yeah, just physiologically, the dopamine that is given to the brain in a relationship where you come together uh, in marriage or out of marriage in a physical way, that creates a bond. And when you get frustrated with it, with the other person, and you say, "Oh, I'm done with it," that doesn't just change our physiology that has created that bond. And God knows that we're created to be husband and wife together with one. And when we live in His promise, when we trust in Him, we can enjoy that relationship. But if we go with a sense of, well, I'm just going to be in this relationship for a period of time, and when I decide I don't want it anymore, just move on, and nobody's going to get hurt. Uh, there's a part of us that we leave with the other person. There's a part of the other person that's left with us, and it creates a bond, a physical bond, a psychological and a spiritual bond. And when you rip those apart, it creates a person who is missing something. And we look at how many drugs are being given out for depression. We look at the suicide rates. We look at the people who are just confused of who they are, and you got to think that there's a very severe consequence of this relationship, to this turnstile relationship that happens, and how that is feeding the individuals who are seeking out some kind of relief in whether it be prescription drugs or illegal drugs, alcoholism, to escape from the harm that has been caused. God gave us these laws so that we can live life fully, not to restrict us. And when we trust in Him, we will enjoy the joy that He has given to us in these commandments. And when we say, "Well, I'm just going to live by my own laws," we trick ourselves. We want to be tricked. We want to think that we're smarter than God or the next guy, but it backfires.
No, and it will. And I'm gonna throw it over to Joe, but I'm gonna give you one quick example. And I pray for this poor girl who's on X, and she's got 9,000 million followers and all that stuff. And she brags, I don't have kids, I don't have a husband, I have a dog, I don't need a babysitter, I have a great job, and blah, blah, blah. And she's dancing in the videos and all this kind of stuff. She's a 30 something. What happens when you're 50, miss? What happens when you're 50 and let's say, for argument's sake, you're not as attractive as you are now, and guys don't really want you because they don't respect you, and that's a fact. That's a stone cold fact. Okay, this idea that you're going to be, let's say, as attractive as you are at 30 is when you are at 50, or vice versa. All right, and then you're going to find yourself alone, and you want to know what? When you're alone, you better hope that God gives you somebody when you're 50 years old, okay, that might have done the same thing, and maybe you could come to your senses. But that's part of like what's being pushed. And again, this girl's got like 5 million followers. But anyway, Joe Resinello.
I want to take the adultery angle in another direction. Again, something that's completely mainstreamed, and that's kind of the direction I want to go with this whole entire conversation today. Aspects of the American culture that violate the Ten Commandments that basically are accepted. It's completely accepted, even in many Catholic circles. Cohabitation, that is a violation of adultery. It's a version of it. How many of us send our kids to college? They're immature, they're abusing alcohol, and basically they embrace the hookup culture. And to your point, Ed, these kids get wounded because there is an exchange between two people in a bond that is physical. And when it fractures, they are wounded. And we are seeing this all over the place at many Catholic colleges, all over the country, even outside of college. Our young people cohabitate before they get married. And frankly, that relationship never works. Well, I don't want to say never. A lot of times it doesn't work based upon statistics. People who cohabitate, who then marry, oftentimes divorce because they didn't start off on a good foot. This is reality, yet we condone it, yet we're okay with it. I'm again, as a father, I have 5 children. I can't control my children, but are we having those conversations with our kids? Are we directing them in the proper way? Because ultimately, these are destructive behaviors, and this is not an opinion. And sometimes people just assume my kid's real smart. He goes to or she goes to a great college. Oh, he has a boyfriend. She has a boyfriend. They're living with one another. Oh, they have great jobs. They'll have a great life. I got news for you. You get involved in a bad marriage. I don't care if you went to Harvard. You're not going to have a good life. You're not. Period. End of story. And are we teaching our kids, or better put, are we basically saying, well, that's just what everybody does? Well, guess what? We don't do that in my house, and I'm not going to stand for it. And that's our job as Catholic parents. And at the end of the day, we can't control our kids, but are we having that conversation? Are we witnessing what true marriage is? A marriage that's open to life. Are we living our vows? Because that's how we're communicating that to our children. This is what marriage is. We're open to life. Ed, your thoughts, because that is again completely mainstream. Then we wonder why Susie comes home from college and she's on antidepressant drugs. Then we wonder why Betsy had an abortion. Then we wonder why Johnny got divorced. Why should we wonder?
I've got 100 thoughts going through my head. That is such uh, a topic with so many problems built into it that we've created. First off, it's humility. I think humility is we need to embrace humility in regards to a culture, a generation that has grown up with that as their norm, almost an expectation to live a life of adultery starting from even before college age anymore, based on the role model they see on the TV. And so you've got this generation that has grown up with that's the norm. And now I've got to tell my kids they can't, they shouldn't, they won't be happy. That's where we need to embrace humility as a culture, as individuals, to say, yeah, I am a sinner. And we can all raise our hand and say, I'm a sinner. And we can go to the foot of the cross and we can say, Jesus, I have sinned against your commandments. Help me in my brokenness to be restored. Help me. Um, and in doing so, we can then say, kids, grandkids, our society is taking you the wrong direction. It took me the wrong direction. And we need to show the kids the greatness of their bodies. We need to show them that their bodies are so much more precious, are to be revered, that you would never want to desecrate your body for someone else's pleasure. It is too important. It's too valuable. John Paul II in Theology of the Body said, it's not that we make too much of sex in our culture, we make too little of it. We don't really see it as the wonderful opportunity and the gift from God to participate with Him in creation and to give our bodies as a precious, pure, and holy gift to one another in the sacrament of marriage. And we have to turn this up, the right side up. It's been turned upside down for so long, and that conversation shouldn't start in junior high. That conversation shouldn't start in college. It should start when they're 5 years old. Not in any graphic way, not to, but to tell them, God, God made you in His image and likeness. He gave you a body that is so precious and so important. We need to make sure that we keep our body protected and we protect others' bodies. And as they get a little bit older, say, God created you for a wonderful purpose. And it'll be revealed to you as you get older. And as they get older, you start to bring in some of the things that we better be teaching them ourselves, because they're going to learn it somewhere else. And to have that not
And
as
I want to
not as
just
a
piggyback
conversation
on
when
what you
they're
said.
teenagers, but start when they're young and lifting up the glory of their body and to give them that understanding and that appreciation that, wow, I don't want to harm anything that's so precious.
As you were saying that, it harkens me back to a conversation I had at a college reunion. This is before I was married. A friend of mine, she's married to another friend of mine. We both went to a Catholic university. And, at the time I wasn't married. I got married at 43. I think it was like my 20th, what's it called? College reunion. Anyway, so I'm talking to this girl. Her name is Lisa. And I'm basically like, she's talking about her marriage and she was talking about contraception. And we had a good relationship. So I could, be honest. And I said, but Lisa, when you're contracepting, and this is why I'm telling this in this context, because people don't understand why the church is against contraception. I said, you're using each other. You're using each other for pleasure. And her response to me was, I'm okay with that. Now, okay, my response back is this, and many people would say that. Honestly, if you could have that relationship, that bleeds into other aspects of your marriage, whether you realize it or not. And it will destroy your marriage little by little by little. Because love gives, it doesn't take. And if I'm taking from my wife in a sexual manner, I will take from her in other ways. And it will little by little erode your marriage. You see, people don't understand that. And her response, this is a very intelligent person, by the way. Let me just phrase this. Like before, people could say, oh, she's just stupid. No, actually, she's not. She's not stupid. She's very smart and very successful. But this is how people view it. They say, oh, it's okay. He's using me and I'm using him. Do you value your marriage? Because that behavior will bleed into other aspects of your marriage and it may even destroy it. Your thoughts, Ed?
Well, it all starts in the heart. Exactly. It's that uh, attitude of love for others, or that attitude of love for self. And a lot of we can trick ourselves to say, well, I love the other person. Look what I did for him last week. I did this, that, and the other thing. I cooked for him. But if the underlying motivation in the heart is love of self, it is going to bleed over into all aspects of your relationship. It's going to be harder to make that sacrifice. And, our culture has lost, in large part, a very large part, has lost the appreciation for sacrifice for others. and it's all what the other person needs to sacrifice for me. And the more we embrace the culture's uh, attitude of what's in it for me, the less happy we're going to be. And the more we embrace what can I do for the other? How can I share what I have with others and make their life easier and better? How can I show them love? The happier we all be, not just the other person, but all of us. You think of, anybody who has given of themselves to another person, whether it be sitting down and doing, just listening to them, giving them a friendly ear to listen to, whether it's giving them money to help them pay for their bills, whether it just be helping them hold the door open while they're carrying their groceries out of the door. That we all experience that joy. We've all experienced that, atheist or not, believe in God, not. We've all given of ourselves in a moment and shown and seen the joy that it gives the person that's receiving it, and it creates joy within our hearts. That's what we desire, and we need to realize that pursuing a selfish love, so to speak, it erodes that joy and it never creates contentment. It never creates contentment. At the symposium I was at Benedictine College a week ago, Tim Carney gave a talk and he gave all these statistics on how those individuals who are married and have children, time after time, in all of his charts, were 20 points happier than those who were single, pursuing a career, having big bank accounts. We don't find happiness in the things of this world. We find discontentment.
And let's stay there. We have a few minutes left and talk about obviously true happiness can only come from God. You talk about true love, real love gives, and God gives. Okay, and God gives everything. And one of the commandments is that thou shalt keep the Sabbath. And part of that is, yes, the worship of God, okay, and giving him what he's due. I remember Jesus says, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, render to God what is God's. Okay, so if I go out and go to work and God understands that, and I spend my time earning money to help my family, to support my family, okay, but I have to give to God what is God's. And God deserves, in justice, God deserves worship because God gives everything. Yet, we miss Mass. People don't go to church on Sundays, don't feel the need to go to church on Sundays. If they do, they don't take it very seriously. Okay? That's what God is due. The God who gives you everything is due at least what? 1 hour a week? Okay? In worship and recognition and gratitude. Spend the last couple minutes, Ed, talking about that. Keeping the commandment, thou shalt keep the Sabbath.
Gratitude is such a powerful virtue to have gratitude. And and the virtue of justice, it really is the part that makes this all come together. And just in gratitude, we give to God what He is owed the on the Sabbath to give time to worship and give Him thanks. And does that do God any good? Is that going to help God be better? Well, he's going to be joyful because we're rejoicing in him when we do. We're being grateful for him, and that's a blessing to us. He gives us that commandment, not so we can say, well, I've got to carve out an hour of my week to give to God, and now I can check the box and be on with my week. He gives that to us so that we can enjoy the time just to let go of the worldly stresses and the burdens and to put him at the foot of the cross and to really just rest in him. God, he created everything in 6 days, and he could have said, okay, everything's created, we're done. Um, and that would mean that we'd be launched straight from Saturday night right into Monday. And how fun would that be to just have that day cut off? But he didn't want it. He loves us so much more. He said, I've given you all these blessings, and now I want to give you a day to enjoy them. Just a day. I call it God's divine day of vacation for us. to set aside all the stresses of the world so that we can worship with God and be in union with Him, because we need that so that we can be prepared for the week ahead. We need to rest, truly rest. And we need to use that day for the relationships, the truly finer things of life that that really we hold near and dear to us. But what we've done in our culture is we've taken and we filled up this divine day of vacation, and we filled it up with work. We filled it up with getting the laundry done and the grass cut and the kids' homework project done and preparing for the week on Monday. And we get everything ready for the week, except we don't get ourselves ready. And God knew that we needed to do that so that we could be prepared for the challenges in the week ahead. So we're not weak and vulnerable to temptation. We're not weak and vulnerable to snap at one of our family members. It's a beautiful gift, and
No,
we need to take it
absolutely.
back.
Absolutely, Ed Van Buskirk. I'm reminded, the band Jethro Tull had a song years ago in the 70s titled Wind Up. And the main line in the song is, He's not the kind of God that has to be wound up on Sundays. As a criticism, of course, of, now this is England, so probably criticism of high Anglicanism, but obviously it pertains to the Catholic Church. And as I grew up, I listened to that song and realized, right, right, exactly. He does not need to be wound up on Sundays. I do. I do, and we do. Okay. So it's that misconception. Ed Van Buskirk, we're coming up on the end. Let our audience know again where they can learn more about what you have going on, your articles, and all that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
our website is godsrecipe.org, GODSRECIPE.org. We've got some wonderful resources you can download for free, some videos, all to learn what is wonderful and truth, the wisdom of God's 10 Commandments. And if nothing else, we've got some images of the 10 Commandments. Print them off, put them in a frame, put them on your wall so you have these wonderful words of wisdom right there we can see every day.
Absolutely. Ed Van Buskirk, as always, our friend. Thanks for coming on. We're looking forward to the next time already. Excellent. Thank you all out there for joining us at the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial. We post these all over social media, as well as being on the radio. So please, if you like the conversations, we hope you do, like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Let's get out to a wider audience. And thanks once again. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.